Good afternoon, everybody. The Commissioners Task Force is called to order. Notice that there is a quorum present. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and we welcome everybody that's listening. I have an announcement that we will need to discuss at the end of this meeting. At the next meeting, the people that make the presentation to us are not going to be available at the regular time because they are on a plane, and it's a little difficult to do that from a plane. So we will discuss, so they will have a recommendation for an alternative time that we can discuss at the end of this session. Today's agenda is provided. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved, Melissa Rooker.
Melissa moves, and
Adam Thomas
seconds the motion. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, the motion carries for those of you that I can see. And now we have, are there any additions or corrections to the June 10th Task Force meeting minutes? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved, Adam Thomas.
Adam and Bert, okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, thank you so much. And that motion carries. I guess the first one did too. I forget to say that sometimes. And so now, Doug, take over.
Thank you, Chairman Porter. Welcome, everybody. Nice July day in Kansas. So as usual, we'll start with our Sr2 changes. We've got 13 districts that submitted changes for this month. That will bring their total planned expenditures to $17.3 million, but it is only a $47,000 change between what in total as you look at it. So 13 plans, 17.3 million, but really only $47,000. As we look at them, a lot of them are still just shifting some money around. Remington uses up a little bit more of their allocation, but they've still got some room to spare, but that's going to premium pay. Blue Valley, that used that $1,900, made up the rest of what they had left to spend for Sr2. Humboldt is just moving some money around to buy some curriculum. Ellsworth still have about $40,000 left in their allocation after this $70,000. This is for software. Manhattan and Ellis were just moving money around. Manhattan for premium pay and some salaries, Ellis for curriculum. Then Rose Hill actually is spending less money. That was because some of the computers or technology that they were wanting to purchase came in under budget. Peabody Burns moving money around for curriculum and salaries. Augusta substitutes and benefits. Then Caney Valley, same thing, moving money around for salaries. Coffeyville for premium pay, Fredonia for premium pay, but no net changes in there. What's been approved. And then the last one, El Dorado, same thing, summer school and some salaries. So, but no net change. So like I said, when you take the additions and then the subtraction from Rose Hill at $60,000, it's only a $47,000 net change in what's already been approved. Our teaching and learning piece still stands at about 80% with that $47,000. And that would be the change requests.
Any questions related to the Sr2 change request? Seeing none, a motion would be in order to approve the Sr2 changes.
Chairman Porter, this is Bert Lewis.
Okay, I see Jamie first, and Bert, you got the second again. Did you have a question, Bert, or were you seconding?
No.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the Sr2 changes, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. And let's move on to Sr3.
Okay, so as we come into this month, the ones that were conditionally approved back in February, we've got one more to add to the list to be fully approved, and that would be Neodesha. And so with Neodesha, that leaves us 9 districts that were conditionally approved back at the beginning when we were trying to push things through. We still have 9 to go, and we kind of wanted to ask for a little bit of input from you all. The challenges on these 9 are on the narratives for their stakeholder engagement. And we thought maybe we'd just give you an example of how we're dealing with things, because you guys are the ones that are getting the calls that are saying that we're being unreasonable or we're asking too much or whatever it might be. So just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of what we're going through. So we had a district, they have 640 kids or so in their district. They, in their response to the stakeholder engagement, they had told us that they had put out a survey to all of the different stakeholders, and there was a limited response to those. So this happens to be the teacher one. They had 12 teachers respond to the survey. As far as the other groups, they had no students that responded, no Native Americans that responded. They said they had 4 civil rights groups respond, but didn't tell us who those might be. So we really have no idea on that. And that 8 subgroups had responded. Well, we know a lot about these districts, so we know which subgroups they should have and which ones should be included. So our response to this survey that was lightly participated in was, okay, this is a good starting point, but how did you engage the people who did not choose to take part in the survey? Because we feel like that's part of it. You need to make that personal contact. Now, students shouldn't be that difficult because they're in session. You can have a home room and talk to kids about it. I mean, there's multiple ways you can engage students. Same way with teachers. You have faculty meetings, you have in-service days. There's lots of ways to engage people besides sending out a survey. And so that's kind of how we approach this. Okay, we'll give you credit for the survey, but then how did you follow up? Because you had 0 student responses. And so we sent the written response back, made a phone call, and then you can see the response we got back in the narratives in the application, which basically says that school's out, we can't contact anybody, this is what we've got. So I guess what we're kind of putting out there is, does the task force feel like just a survey is enough? Or are we in the right place to ask for, I guess, more personalized attention to these stakeholder groups?
Okay, Melissa.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to liken this to being on the campaign trail or being an elected official. I mean, I can think of the number of doors I knocked, the number of town hall meetings I held. There's a point at which when people don't respond, when they, those that are interested show up, those that don't ignore. I'm struggling with how far you go. I would say, so that's my question, is what is a required amount of energy to be in compliance versus what, setting some appropriate expectations, and could this district schedule a time for maybe a public sort of town hall meeting and then call it enough? If 12 people show up, to that meeting and not 640 families or, however many teachers. Like, there's a point at which if people don't want to participate, I'm not sure how much obligation we can put on the district to keep trying to do more and more. I know from experience that I knocked 8,000 doors in my last campaign and still had people say, you never reached out. And it's like, I don't know, at some point enough needs to be enough.
So I think that's the question. When is enough that we're actually discussing now? Frank, I don't know the answer. We'll probably come back to that, Melissa.
So, I mean, if I look at the way we had to do things after we got information back from KSDE that said we hadn't done enough, I don't think they need to do anything more with the survey because it's not getting them anything. It's, can they get with representative groups or representatives from different groups and have a conversation about the survey information they received? With teachers, there should be, I mean, if they have an association, there's a leadership for the association that should be easy to contact. You can do student leadership groups. You have the student council. There, if it's, depending on where there may or may not be some of the civil rights groups to reach out to. But I think you can also note that you tried and you didn't get anything. But you have to kind of document how you tried. So I think they ought to give up on the survey and just make some phone calls and see if they can get some input from some individuals.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Bert.
I totally agree with everything Frank had said and most of what Melissa said, other than it asks for a meaningful conversation. So with the teachers, the students, and parents, at least trying a town hall meeting, or at least some of those, I think that's meaningful conversation. I understand there are some outside groups that they may not have any availability in their districts, but the group I represent, the teachers and my students in my school or in any school, there are people there. They need to sit down and have the conversation, in my opinion. It says meaningful conversation. It doesn't say survey.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from the three people that have responded that seems to be consistent is that there needs to be a follow-up. If the survey results are insufficient, there needs to be an opportunity to actually have conversations with people and students and teachers and other school employees since they're there. I mean, that may not be easy to do today, but during the time that they're actually in session, that should not be a major challenge. Am I correct in assuming, am I stating what I've heard correctly? Okay, thank you. Does that, anybody else want to chat? Okay. Yeah, well, now thank you, Frank. I tried to use you to paraphrase what you said. Okay. Anybody else want to comment? If you don't comment, we're going to assume what's been said is the opinion of the group. Let's move on.
Thank you all very much. That supports what we believe we've been trying to do. So we will keep doing it and you all will keep getting the phone calls. So that brings us to our ESSER 3s. We've got 16 on the slate today, representing $18.9 million. You all have, and the state board have approved 85 plans so far. Like I said, we've got the 9 that are still in that conditional approval phase. 16 today, that will put us at 110 that have gone before the task force for ESSER 3. We've got 53. At least the other day, we had 53 that were currently under review, which leaves 123 plans that have not been submitted. Once again, we're still looking at a lot of smaller districts still. Some of the bigger ones are starting to come in and they are currently in that review process right now. But this batch is still in the lower population end. As we look at the expenses, expenditures per district, the average was almost 2 million. The range 139,000, that's Ellis at the bottom end, but that's only 33% of their allocation that they're putting in for in this first round. Going up through Pittsburgh at almost 5 million, and that's almost their whole allocation. And then the range per student, same two districts. Ellis is at the bottom end at 371 per student, Pittsburgh at the high end at 2,000 per student. Breakdown of the allowable expenditures comes out to about 83% for this batch for the teaching and learning components. If we look at cumulative, 171 million or so in the ESSER 3 plans that have gone before you. That is about 70% of that is going towards teaching and learning. This is $768 million. There's a lot more capital improvements going to be used, or money's going to be used for capital improvements, HVACs, windows, those kinds of things. So I think we'll see the teaching and learning percentage go down as we go through these, just because there are some bigger projects.
And let's take a pause here. Jamie has a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, I'm sorry. It actually is interrupting Doug's comment here. And my question is more in, with the chat conversation. So back to the survey thing, we're not saying that no surveys. We're just saying that if not enough participation is on a survey, then a conversation needs to happen. Is that correct?
For those of you that commented, you want to follow up with that?
This is Bert, and I feel that a survey works as far as communication as a starting point, but it does ask for meaningful conversation in the regulations. And so if there is no back and forth where, okay, this is what the survey said, this is what we're going to do, I feel like there needs to be back and forth. That's just me, one person.
Well,
Hey, Frank,
this is,
go ahead.
I mean, so I think a survey is actually a good idea to get started. Actually all districts have to have things like site councils and those kinds of things that I mean, that would be a conversation. You have groups that are set up. So I don't think it's that difficult to do. Like I said, we got ours sent back twice, mostly because of groups outside of the district. And I mean, we were able to comply. So part of this is it's a difficult time to change the rules now, because we've already got, we've got about half the districts now that, not quite that many, that have already gone through the process. So I would be in favor of keeping the process the way it is.
Okay, Melissa.
I was just going to say that survey is certainly an important part of the mix. It's one tool in the toolkit for soliciting the feedback. So I think, I mean, that was the point I was trying to make, is it takes multiple forms of contact to comply, but we just need to draw that line about when the effort has been there sufficiently, whether the input meets a certain volume of input or not. When has the effort been expended? And I think scheduling some meetings in this case, and in really the case of any other district, is what's called for to enhance.
And go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, so just to clarify that, so what we're saying is a survey is okay, and KSD staff is responsible for deciding whether or not sufficient feedback came back in the survey. So in the case of if I send a survey to my staff and 50% responded, KSDE staff is going to say that's enough, that's not enough. Is that what we're saying?
Bert?
That's not what I'm saying, but as I said, I'm one person. If they send a survey and only 15% of their staff respond, then I think there needs to be an additional conversation. In the regulation, it says establish meaningful conversation. Survey is one way. You ask a question, and depending on how you ask that question, you could get multiple different points of answer. At least that's what I remember from debate. And I'm saying, as long as individuals have made the attempt to get information from multiple stakeholders in their organization that they have contact with or can have contact with, I don't care how many fill out the survey, if it's 75% or 25%. Conversation is a two-way street, not one way. Again, this is all my opinion, and I'm not trying to bash anybody. I know a lot of us out there are trying really hard. I just know what's happened in my district, and I know what teachers are telling me is not happening in other districts.
Okay, Jason.
To Jamie's question, I think it is, I think that's what we, well, I'll speak for myself. That's what I would like for staff to do, is to make those determinations on if there needs to be more. That's who we trust to do, bring all of the information together for us to make decisions on. So I think we've given direction on how much information we really need. It's up to them to make that determination that and bring that to us. If it's not enough information, then we need to ask for more.
You know, I'm hesitating to comment because I've been out of that chair for several years. But it seems to me like we have meetings all the time, and it's easy to bring this up at a site council meeting. It's easy to bring this up at a faculty meeting. It's easy to bring it up at a student council meeting. Now, some of those others may not be, but it doesn't appear to me to be that difficult to have that meaningful conversation. But I say, I probably shouldn't even comment because I'm out of that chair now. Mike.
I think we're diving in the weeds way too deep. We're trying to understand everyone's culture, everyone's level of engagement at each school district. And we do meet all the time, and we do have a lot of level of engagement. So if it's just a matter of documenting that engagement is what we're saying, then tell them to document it. But I think we're way too deep in the weeds, and we're not trusting the good people running our districts the way we should be.
And I want to follow on with that. I think everybody's trying to do the right thing. We just make sure that we need to give them guidance. Go ahead, Randy.
Doug, can you brief for everyone how you would go about that now? Because I think the simple answer to Jamie's question is yes. Surveys can be in agreement, and then it gets a little muddy, right, in terms of the participation of that. Can you just kind of generalize what the staff looks at when they get those things back?
So I guess my first comment or statement is that there's good surveys and there's bad surveys. And you can survey people and tell them what you're going to do, or you can survey them and ask them what they would like to see. And so that we kind of look at that when the surveys come in. A lot of districts give us links to their surveys so we can actually go online and see them, or see the Google form that they sent out. It's also great if they can disaggregate who's actually responding. If they just say that they sent out a survey to everybody but don't know who responded, then there's really no way to tell whether the interest of all of those subgroups are being represented. So good surveys have check boxes where you can mark whether you're a parent, a teacher, an EL student, or parent of an EL, parent of a foster, whatever it might be. So there's good surveys and there's not so good surveys. So those are kind of the things that we look at overall. What's your response rate? If you can tell us that, you know, if you sent out a survey and half the people responded to it, well, that's pretty good for a survey. And so then can you break it down as to who actually responded? Well, if the only people that responded were middle-class white people, you really didn't get any diversity in your plan as you were getting ready to put it together. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at is how well does that survey canvass your whole community? And like I say, we, you know, between our work with districts and our other programs, we know a lot about what populations they have, who they might not have. So if somebody doesn't represent their EL students, well, we can look up and figure out that they probably don't have any based on where they're at in the state. And so, I mean, and I think it goes to whoever made the comment that if you can show us that you made the effort, whether anybody responded to your effort, but if you can document that you tried to reach out to those people and they didn't respond, that's good enough. But when you can't show that you even tried, you picked up the phone and made a phone call, that there's $1 million tied to that phone call that you had to make, it seems like it's a pretty good use of your time. And so that's just kind of what we're looking for as we're reviewing these stakeholder groups, if that helps.
Do you have a sense of this is a question to Doug and his staff. Do you have a sense of where we are? Have we sort of answered your question?
I think so. I think you all are on the same page that we are. I mean, I think Frank's comments and Bert's comments are right in line with what we've been trying to do. And we just want to make sure that's what the task force wants.
Okay, are there any other comments related to that before we move on? I'll give you plenty of time to.
This is Melissa. I would just advocate for balance. We do want that. I do want that. I want it as thorough and appropriate as possible. I also want a balance with the need to keep the process moving along, which I think is some of what Mike is trying to express. I know I've had some feedback from districts that are feeling like it's taking a while. And so we need to balance the competing responsibilities and interests that we represent here and make sure that we are thorough but efficient with what we ask in this process and expect to see.
Very well said. I wish I was smart enough to have said that. So let's move on. If you think if we've answered your question sufficiently, Doug.
You have. Thank you. So, and then to finish up ESSER 3 for this month, we do have one ESSER 3 change request, and that is Cherryvale. And that just adds their HVAC project to what has already been approved by the task force and the board. We are holding these big projects back from you until all of the appropriate paperwork has been turned in and everything's met those requirements before we move them in front of you. So that's the deal with Cherryvale here, is that they have all the documentation necessary to go ahead with this project in place. And so just asking for the approval of their HVAC project.
Okay, so at this, go ahead.
Oh, and this just, if you add that 1.7 million where we stand, and like I said, the big HVAC projects that are going to be in ESSER 3 are going to change our teaching and learning a little bit, and so that does drop it down from 70% to 69%. So, other than that,
so is this? So, yeah, questions. This is the pre-read for all of them, or just the Cherryvale one?
It's both. It's all new ESSER 3s plus the Cherryvale ESSER 3 change request.
Okay. Is there any comments or questions? we've had this information. I'm not seeing anything, Doug. Wait a second.
I stopped.
Okay, that comes later. Go ahead.
So I think I stopped sharing so you could vote.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the ESER 3 and the ESER 3 change request?
So moved.
Okay, who was that? Mike? Was that Mike and
That's
Jason?
Jason. Sorry, Jason Winbull.
Okay, so we got Mike and Jason. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Anything else before we talk about the next meeting?
I don't have anything.
Okay, as I indicated earlier, on the next regular scheduled meeting date, the team is going to be on a plane coming back from DC. Do you have a suggestion? Anybody from the team, Doug, or your team, have a suggestion of when would be an appropriate time or a time that we could meet? Let's see whether or not we can have enough people there.
We were wondering if it would be possible to meet at noon on the August 5th. That would give us time to have this meeting and then catch a taxi to the airport.
Anybody cannot do that?
Mr. Chairman, this is Melissa. I think that will work. Our children's cabinet meets at 9 a.m. that Friday morning. We aim to be done well before noon, but there, depends on board discussion. So I will endeavor to make that work.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I will try to make that work as well. I'll be coming back from a conference in Denver, so I just may have to do that in my car, but I think I can do that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we at least have a quorum, so let's just schedule it at noon.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from you, Doug?
Nope, I am done.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Porter. I just wanted you to be aware that Senator Marshall is going to be sponsoring legislation to alter ESER 3 funds, possibly to include what I'm going to call safe and secure schools. Now, I don't know the details of what that would entail. I have had conversations with his office recently. I don't know how far that will go. It may go and may be attached, but I know that he's going to attempt to broaden the definition, which would, my understanding, would have to happen legislatively to include security for schools. So I wanted you to be aware of that. It would not be retroactive, from what I understand. So anything that had already been expended would already be expended. Again, I don't know if it has any traction, but did want you to know that he is attempting to do that in Congress.
Okay, and we do know that the legislature does not move with the speed of the wind, so that's probably not going to happen immediately. Melissa has another question.
I do, and Randy, you may not have the answer, but you say it won't be retroactive. I'm wondering if you got detail about whether the difference between funds spent and funds encumbered, whether it would affect encumbered funds.
I did not, and I don't think the details had been drafted, so I don't know. But even if a law gets passed and regulations have to be adopted, in which for our agency to operate by, so it's a multi-stage process. I think it's a fairly heavy lift, but who knows? I mean, it could be attached to any bill, and I just wanted you to be aware that there's an attempt to do that.
And one other clarifying question, did you get a sense of whether this was simply expanding allowable uses to include the safety and security, or is it a mandatory type of expenditure?
I got the sense it was allowing the use of.
Thank you.
Okay, Bert.
I just want to say that my comments, and as you know, come from the teacher perspective. And when I look at the different pre-read stuff and the districts, I contact teachers in those districts. Some of the districts have said, yes, they have had conversation. Others say, no, they were not involved. That is the reason I vote the way I do to support the individuals that put me on this committee. I have nothing against any of the districts on here or any of the districts that submit information. And I know most everyone is trying to do the right thing. I just have to represent the constituency that put me here.
I appreciate your comments, and that's the way democracy is supposed to work. Anything else? Well, I guess it'll be noon on August the 5th that we meet each other again. Have a good weekend, and we are adjourned.